Okay, I'm delighted to be here today to talk about a very dear topic to me, the financial penalties of unpaid work. But it's more, I hope to convince you that actually we have to seize this moment to open the status quo about care, and then so we can transform our caregiving and that in a way that works for all of us. Who am I? My name is Patricia Gestoso, and I'm head of scientific support and customer operations for an engineering software company. I'm also a diversity and inclusion advocate. I've lived in 6 different countries. I'm originally Spanish, and I moved to Venezuela when I was a teenager. I studied engineering, and then I moved to Canada to actually study my PhD in computational chemistry, then to Greece to do my postdoc, then to France for work, and in the last 16 years I've been in the UK, in Manchester. So as you can see, for me, diversity inclusion is not a nice to have. I wholeheartedly believe of the value that a diverse and inclusive team delivers. On the other side, I'm also in tech. So I'm in engineering, which are typically male-dominated careers and professional paths. So what I realized is that even when I started to study engineering, definitively women were not a majority. We could see that more and more women were embracing STEM careers. However, as the time passed, I realized that I was missing to be surrounded by women. As I climbed the ladder, there were less and less women, fantastic women that have proved their value. What was happening? What I realized is that those women were pushed out from tech. Tech that has great, relatively good salaries and flexibility has a huge problem of attrition. Actually, more than 40% of women that start in tech leave the sector after 5 years, which is dramatic. So when I realized that, then I began to actually actively founding and spearheading different initiatives within the company I work for, but also in UK to reduce this attrition of women. Yes, we had some wins. For example, we increased the maternity and paternity leave at the company I work for, but let's say it was incremental. However, all that, even if it was small, that we were winning, it came to a stop last year. When in March we began in Europe to experience the lockdowns, I realized that we were actually going backwards. A lot of the governments here in Europe were talking about lockdowns for a month, then they were for 2 months, and just naturally assuming that women will take on all the additional unpaid care. What's more, at the same time, I was reading and listening to women that had experienced pandemics in South Asia, East Asia, and Africa, SARS, Ebola, Zika, and that time after time they were saying that women bore the brunt of the pandemic. So in collaboration with the Global Professional Women Network, we launched a survey worldwide, and we got more than 1,300 respondents, mainly from Europe and US. which share with us actually the amount of unpaid caregiving they were provided during the pandemic, but also prior to the pandemic. So let's start first with the numbers, and I think it's a really good segue to the fantastic talks of Dr. Eisler earlier today. As I mentioned, we got 1,300 answers, and from professional women, mostly white, heterosexual, and also middle upper income. And what strikes us is that these women, actually, they were, even prior to the pandemic, in 2019, they were clocking 41 hours a month on unpaid care, mostly caregiving and household chores. Can you imagine? So that is a full work week on top of their work week. As to our amazement, they were not only part-time women working part-time, but also a lot of the respondents were women working full-time. So then we asked them, and that the survey was around the time of April, early May. We asked them at that time how much effort they were providing in terms of care, and it was actually more than the double. It jumped from 41 hours a month to 92 hours a month. That is more than two full work weeks on unpaid work. To give you a little bit more of granularity, prior to the pandemic, around 75% of the time of unpaid care was about household chores and the remaining for care. During the pandemic, in our sample, about 56% was around household chores, then about 26% homeschooling, and the rest caregiving. But we didn't want only to have averages about the hours, because that has been reported already. We wanted to know in terms of salary, how much women were actually missing. And we used the rates in the market for household chore services, the lowest salary for schooling, and the lowest salary for caregiving. And that actually gave us the following numbers. For 2019, we calculated that women were missing around $7,000 a year in income in terms of unpaid care work. And that jumped to $17,000 a year. Can you imagine? Maybe some of you, at this point, you are thinking, I'm exaggerating, $17,000 a year. That sounds too much. So I wanted really to check if there was something published, and actually there is a lot published about how much money is not paid in terms of caregiving. To my amazement, if you go to the website of the Office of National Statistics in the UK, they report that actually there is about $1.7 trillion of unpaid care per year in the UK. And we are only 60 million people. Imagine in these states. So in the case of UK, if you take into account and you add that to the GDP, you get basically that total of GDP goes such as unpaid care is about 40% of the amount of GDP. Can you imagine how much women, how well they could live? We could live if we were paid for the care we provide. And for those of you that still think I'm exaggerating with my 17,000, actually, when you do the maths and you see this 1.74 trillion in unpaid care, that goes for $26,000 a year. So actually, our values are smaller than the average in the UK. So, of course, that strikes us because we were not only thinking in the effort that goes unpaid, but actually a lot of women during lockdown, they had to reduce their hours in paid work to do unpaid work. And the other very important thing that usually is not reported in other studies is that we always talk about the average. As I mentioned now, I said the women in our survey actually moved from 41 hours a month in unpaid care to 92. But actually the variability is incredible. And when we talk about averages, we are not really solving the problem for all women. And I'm giving you an example with caregiving. We ask about 25% of the women in our sample provided care, for example, elderly care. And to our surprise, some of them were already providing more than 40 hours per month in terms of caregiving. But actually, during COVID, 15% of those women were providing more than 40 hours per month in caregiving. So, on the other side, if we look at the average was only 16 hours in caregiving per month. So if we only look at the average, we only consider the average women, we will never be able to solve the problem because we will really narrow down in a very limited section of the population. Another thing that at the time surprised us, but now doesn't surprise us anymore, is that in all countries, with the exception of Norway, more than 50% of women reported that they bore the brunt of the pandemic, of the household chores during the pandemic. That's now not surprised, but as you know, that was a year ago, and already women were seeing the gap between the care they were delivering and their partners. Other thing that was really very interesting was actually that, as I mentioned, we thought before launching the survey that mostly will be women working part-time, those that will be delivering more hours of unpaid care. And actually, in our sample, that was not true. We had a lot of women working full-time, delivering again 36, 40 hours a month of unpaid care. The other thing that it was very troublesome was that when we evaluated the age of the respondents, we realized that actually the women that were delivering more unpaid care were those between 36 and 50 years old. The women that are preparing themselves to be leaders or they are leaders. So we anticipate really that with those trends, we won't have women, we will lose 1 or 2 generations of women leaders. And the other thing that actually was very revealing is that we asked women about their leisure time. So what they told us was that the majority could see very well that their leisure time had decreased significantly with COVID. That is not a luxury. We know that lack of leisure time, lack of sleep, actually is correlated with some some types of cancer, some also stroke, and also some long-term disabilities. So all of that gave us really a lot of pause, because we thought, a lot of people we were hearing that they were saying this is caused because of COVID. But actually, our analysis was leading us to believe that actually COVID didn't cause this. What we see is that COVID has accelerated and made it more visible. But actually, the issue has been there for a long, long time. And it goes as far as at least 3 centuries ago with Adam Smith and his book, The Wealth of Nations, where he actually links work to self-interest. And he shares the example of a baker. He said, a baker makes bread because he's going to pay for it. However, and that for Adam Smith has value, because the baker does that for somebody else for money. But if that same baker actually makes the bread for their family, suddenly it's unpaid care. It's not valuable. It's not worth to be called work. And that is such a strong limited belief that is still we can see now as what we decide is work and is not work. A striking example is actually to look at the Institute of the International Labour Organization. I invite you to go to their website and see their definitions of what is work. And there is very clear. An individual that dedicates their week to provide full-time unpaid care is considered economically inactive, the same that a person that is sick and cannot work. So, as you can see, even an international institute is simply deciding that unpaid care, that the care that we provide to our families, to our children, our partners, our parents is not work. The other thing that we also saw is that, and that alarmed us as well, is that we saw a pattern of provided band-aids to women instead of really seizing this moment to open caregiving. What we saw were companies and governments talking about working from home and as well hybrid work as the way to make this caregiving work. Actually, unfortunately, I see this as a band-aid because it doesn't go to the root cause of the problem. That is that we don't value care, even if we know that care is the basics, actually, of our society. So how we can see us going forward? I think that we need to be strong, and we don't need, we are at the moment where we actually can use the pandemic to transform care. And it's there is no one-off, there is no magic bullet, but actually we need to challenge our beliefs. And I'll come now to three ways in which we can challenge the status quo, or better said, three levels. The first one, and other speakers in this global summit have talked about it, is the individual level. It's hard to have conversations about unpaid care at home. I know women with whom I talk, and they have told me, Patricia, actually, anyway, I'm going to do it. So I don't want to fight. I think that I understand it, but we need to empathize with our future selves. Our future selves that will be poorer than us, that will be older than us. So the first step is to measure. And again, it's hard, but I invite you for a week, for 2 weeks maximum, to really be thorough and see how many hours you work, and then really see how many hours of household chores you perform, how many hours of homeschooling, how many hours of caregiving you provide. But also go further and see how many leisure time you how many hours of sleep. And then let's have that conversation with your partner. And again, I think it's very important that we connect with our future selves, because the money we don't earn now, it will impact our future self that will be 60 years old, 70 years old. And that if we don't take care of ourselves now, financially, and as well, our mental and physical health, it is going to be much harder for that future, our future self that will be 60 years old. So that would be at the individual level and I would like to add as well that for those with children, I think this is actually the opportunity to show them, what equitable is. And I see it as well, not only as an advantage for women, but it's advantages as well for men. This toxic masculinity doesn't work for them either. And I've known men that once they are in their 70s, 80s, they do regret the time they didn't spend with their children. However, I haven't met yet the man that has told me, I really regret I spent too much time with my children. So that is at the individual level. The next is at the level of organizations, public, private, academic sectors where we work. We need to get rid of other hard limiting belief that is the full time and the 40-hour week. That was actually invented by Henry Ford a century ago, when people were working in a car manufacturer. This doesn't correspond with our way of life anymore. So why we need to still conform to this idea, this very strict idea of the 40 hours? And what's more, this actually make us categorize people in those that appear to be willing to progress, that is, those that work 40 hours or more, and those that work part-time. And we classify as they are not willing to progress. So we need to challenge companies to get more creative. And that is beyond offering flexibility and is beyond offering working from home. We need to challenge, again, those restrictions about the hours. There are other models of work, like working for objectives. We are working as job sharing, for example, that has been very successful, not only at entry level, but it has always been very successful. Is now very successful in companies like Unilever and Microsoft at executive level. So as I said, we need to challenge organizations to really make it work for us. And the third very big pillar is governments, because we need to stop governments to think that they, just by thanking women and carers, that is enough. It's not enough to write a report and say, we have $1.7 trillion in paid care. They need to acknowledge and they need to actually accompany that with credits, with payments, with pensions. So we ensure that caregivers are taken care of. And this is blue sky at all. Actually, I'm very happy to report that there are at least two initiatives that I know of communities in which they exchange care. Is like a care bank and works actually across borders. That is, for example, if a mother is caring here for their children, somebody else can use those credits and then in her family, for example, and use them to request care from somebody else. So there is so much we can do to actually support carers. And I also think that the other very important part that we need to understand is that we need to look at solutions beyond our averages. And that is especially important, for example, for single mothers, single parents, because a lot of the economy, a lot of our systems are actually built only thinking that all parents are in a couple. Usually we assume in a heterosexual couple, and also that they have their own support system. And the reality is that it's not. And we have seen, especially women, single mothers, actually having to decide between work and taking care of their children, and having to go to food banks. So we definitely need to get outside our average and make it work for all. So at this point, I really want to thank you all, and I would love to see if any of this research. I will be very happy to go in more detail, see if there is some of it that resonates for you. I'm going to check the polls. I've added 2 polls to the chat. I'll read to see. And okay, Mary, thank you very much. This is very practical ways to equalize the time spent in the household and for child care by each person in a household. The image of thinking ahead of our future self to assess the effects of paid labor now is quite creative. She's very thoughtful and smart. Thank you very much, Mary. You are very, very kind. I think it's hard because I think that sometimes, especially women, we are educated so much in being the fixers. We fix care. We fix things that, the little things, that nobody wants to do. And so we don't have time to actually strategize, to look at it and see, okay, what about myself in 20 years? So I find that useful for myself, I have to say. Thank you very much, Mary. I would love to as well as get an understanding from the audience if you have ever tracked your unpaid work, or it is something that really is just too much effort. You don't see a lot of value. Because as you can, if you go to the report, I'm going to put it into the chat. If you go to the report, you will see that, of course, I do believe that, it's important to track things. And actually, I didn't invent this. The United Nations really recommends that the best way to start conversations around care is to do a diary. So I wouldn't go into the details, activity by activity, but I do believe that using, buckets, and especially please do look at your leisure time, because I've heard from friends with, that telling me, Patricia, for the last year, I think my only leisure has been to be alone in it and to take a shower. And that's not leisure time. Okay? Any other questions? I'd love to see if this resonates with you. We actually, as I mentioned, we've really seen that a lot of women were really shocked when we put, let's say, a salary to it, and I hope I demonstrated that actually we were very conservative. We calculated about 17,000 unpaid work, and the metrics, actually the average is for the UK is 26,000 not a month, a year. So could you imagine if the average woman will have $26,000 more in their bank account year after year? How we could change the world and change the world? Okay. I love to connect with you. If you want, please do connect with me in LinkedIn, in Instagram, also in Twitter. I do believe in the power of community. So if you are involved in any community regarding care and how we can monetize it and actually flip the chip and make it valuable for the society, I love for you to connect with me. How do you stay so positive knowing knowing how difficult it's going to be for women to achieve equity for their labor? Oh, I'm not sure if I'm positive, but I'm optimistic, and I want to be optimistic because I don't think we have the choice. I think that this is such a, a, a moment in our lives, in history, that if now we simply decide that, it's okay to be frustrated, and it is okay, but we don't use that to change the status quo, it's going to be worse. Because there are analyses that they have done about the economical and political trends after pandemics in the world. And what they have seen is that economically, the worst is yet to come. You actually see the real bump in 10 to 20 years. So we now stop and we don't do anything. It's going to be worse and much worse for our daughters and also for our sons too. Okay, so I see it as a way that now is our turn. We cannot just go back. We need to go forward. So when I'm down, Mary, I think that I hope that we take this moment to create a better world, a better world, and especially I do see. I'm very concerned about all the wonderful women that have been left behind. So, that is what motivates me. That's the long answer. Okay, great response. Possibly the silver lining of this pandemic. If only can make those forward strides. Absolutely, Mary. Yes, we need, and this is why I think community is so important. I think we talk a lot about networking, but personally, what I've seen my strength as an individual is in the communities I belong to, rather than the networking. I think women, we are great at collaboration and helping each other. And, if we can support each other, I think, I want to believe all this. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you very much, Mary. And, thank you very much to all of you that have watched this talk or do watch it in the future. And please do connect with me. I'm passionate about this topic. I see Karen had, you have a question. I haven't seen it. Karen, do you have a question? Okay. Okay. So I think I think we are all good. Okay. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity. And again, I think let's take, seize this moment to change and transform caregiving. Thank you.